If you think about like your schedule for the week in terms of like rocks, pebbles, and sand, your rocks are the big goals. Your pebbles are like the stuff that you kind of really need to like get done. That's like important. And then the sand is like all that extra stuff. Like people have this like natural pull to these things. And you always hear people like later in life, they'll be like, oh, like I always wanted to do this thing, but you know, I never really had the courage to do this, or, oh, but I had to do this other thing. So we know what it is that we like want to do.
Welcome to Born to Create, the podcast where we delve deep into the minds and hearts of artists from all walks of life. I'm your host, Maria, and each week we explore the powerful relationship between creativity and the human experience. Here, artists share their most meaningful life lessons, profound transformations, and the challenges they face along the way. Together, we'll uncover how creativity has shaped their mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Join us on this journey of discovery and inspiration and find out how creativity can impact your life too. All right. Well, super excited. Today I am with Mike Salvione, and he's a DJ producer and all-round music lover. He also got some amazing projects, which I am very curious to go into, something about binaural beats. And well, thank you so much for being on this podcast today, Salvione. I think I would like to start with you perhaps introducing you a little bit more to the people listening, and we'll go from there.
All right. Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to kind of chat and get into things because we know we've been eager to get into a lot of stuff. So we've been holding back just for this show. But yeah, so I'm a DJ producer out of New York. I'm also an audio engineer for some bigger artists like Danny Tenaglia. I run a music production academy called Elevated Academy, which is part of the bigger brand, which is Elevated, which is aimed at raising the overall vibration of the electronic music community through a lot of different ways, mostly through music, though. We have Elevated Radio, you got Elevated Academy, we got a newsletter, the binaural beats, like the list runs on and on. But yeah, it's my passion project for sure. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Jimi Hendrix, which says, music doesn't lie. If there's something to be changed in this world, then it can only happen through music. Mm-hmm. And so the kind of slogan of Elevated is it can only happen through music. And so that's just the change that I'm trying to bring.
Beautiful. Yeah, you're doing all kinds of things, helping people, coaching, mentoring. I mean, there's so many beautiful areas I would love to get into. But first, yeah, how did your love or passion for music start?
It's there's like different aspects of it. Like when I was a kid, my family would always listen to music. And like, I always remember being a kid and like my uncle and my mom would be like listening to music like in her bedroom, and I'd be like changing CDs in the like six disc CD changer. And I remember getting this feeling of knowing that, oh, like they're gonna love this song that like I'm about to put on, and like feeling that anticipation of their reaction. And it's kind of like that same feeling I get when I know I have a really good track like ready to go that would get like a reaction out of a crowd. So I would say it kind of started there. And then, I mean, I was an athlete my whole life. So like really sports was what I was into. And once I finished playing football in college, I kind of was looking for a place to put all of that like energy, because I was like striving every day to be working out or practice or whatever like I needed. And once that ended, I didn't really have a place to put that energy. So I would do like a lot of different finite kind of goals, right? Oh, I'm going to run a 5K, and I'd run the 5K and I'd be like, all right, now what? And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to do a bodybuilding competition. And then I did it and I was like, all right, now what do I do? And then I was always going out to clubs and doing all that. And I was like messing around with DJing. But then like I got into production and I was like, okay, I was like, I really enjoy it, because there's always some other level that you can take it to, right? If you're at level 10, there's level 100. If you're Richie Houghton, like you can still learn something new, push the envelope, do whatever. So it's just a constant quest of improvement every day in like a space. And I think that's when I really fell in love like with music, was was then. And especially the one moment, though, I was in Detroit for Movement. We went to a Circle Local after party and the sun was coming up. It was like the worn down warehouses of Detroit. And the DJ was Mass Productions. And he played like what I called like the perfect track at the perfect moment. And I just felt moved by music in a way that like I've never felt before. And it was like that moment. I remember texting my friend and be like, yo, this is what I want to do. I want to be the person that makes and plays the music that moves people like in that way. And I've just kind of devoted myself ever since.
Wow, that's a wonderful story and amazing, like also to see all this desire and passion that you have and pushing yourself always to, well, and also desiring to always go the next level and almost, yeah, jumping to that. You were doing a doctorate, you were telling me before, right? So like that switch, like how, I mean, you've just shared it, it's like that moment, but how was it for you? Just that I'm doing a doctorate and you were practicing in it and that switch to let that go. What thoughts were running in your mind to almost switch to music?
So when that moment that I was saying about Detroit, like I was already taking like Ableton classes at the time. And then that moment happened and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. But at that same time I was taking those Ableton classes, I was actually in school finishing up my doctorate. So I'd be going to school Monday through Thursday and I'd be taking Ableton classes on the weekend. Yeah. And it was funny because there was other students that would take these extra like doctor classes, like continuing education stuff on Saturday. Oh, we're doing this workshop. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm going to go learn how to make repetitive music. And that was kind of when I realized, okay, this is like really what I'm passionate about. Like other people are passionate about the doctor thing and I enjoy doing it, but it just wasn't, it's not the thing that lights me up. Like music legitimately like gets me out of bed every morning and it's just constantly on my mind in some way, shape or form. But making that transition, I mean, I always knew that music was the thing that like I really wanted to do. Yeah. And so I would do whatever it took. Like I used to wake up at 5 a.m., meditate, journal, and then get in the studio for 3-4 hours, then go to work, come home, eat, sleep, repeat for like a 5 or 6 years because that was just what I had to do. And that is just what I did. That's like almost a recipe for success, right? In some way, we read it and see it everywhere. It's getting up early and like doing most of the things before the day starts and working towards your dreams like that. It feels like you've been very disciplined in that time. And yeah. I think that the sports background definitely contributed to that. And just that discipline of like, all right, like you show up, you work hard, like you get outcomes. Being like a kid with a single mom who would work her ass off to the point I remember I think she worked like 40 something days straight. And we joke around now because like I had this like Pee-wee football game. I had to be like 8 or 9 years old. And we were playing this team that hadn't lost a game in, I don't know, years. And so we actually wound up tying them. And so she comes home from work and I remember like telling her, and it was like she missed it. I was like, yeah. And so we joke about it. I was like, yo, remember you missed like my greatest football game of all time, like whatever. But that's where I got that work ethic from, is like seeing her and just like getting that from her. She was like, yo, just as long as you work hard at whatever it is that you want to do, like it'll work out. And I'm definitely like a full believer in that. I've kind of come up with a couple of my own methodologies, I think, throughout the years for like keys to success, which there's two. Which I think are faith and sacrifice. So when I was in my undergraduate studies, I wasn't doing as well as I should have been, let's just say. And I needed to get into grad school. And a friend of mine kind of whipped me into shape one day. I was like, yo, what are you doing? I was like, you got a good point. So I realized that it takes two things to be successful. It takes faith and it takes sacrifice. So like that faith can be, I'm not talking like faith in a higher power, but like faith in your decisions, faith in the fact that you think that this is the steps that you have to take to get there. Faith, like even if like you want to talk success in a sport, like a team, like you have to have faith in your teammates, or even in a music sense, like faith in the team that you have behind you. And then sacrifice, like you're going to have to give up certain things to get to where you want to get to. But if that's really what you want to do, as long as you do those two things, like you're going to be successful. And even in relationships, maybe it's not sacrifice, maybe it's compromise, but there's always that give and take. And it's, if you want it to be successful, like it really does just take those two things.
Yeah, because my next question would have been like about that mindset. It seems like you've got a strong mindset, and also your experience as well, discovering, okay, yeah, the signs that perhaps were making it very obvious for you what your passion is. I think that's all of that. It's like huge learning about, okay, the things that people sometimes, I guess, struggle with, kind of understanding what is the right thing for me, or how do I discover or figure out what the thing for me, and how do I go after it, or perhaps thinking I can never follow my dreams almost. And it feels like you've kind of like discovered those things, which I find is very inspiring. And you've walked that talk. And I there's a post that you posted as well, which I found really lovely, about your childhood dream, and then almost with Danny Tenaglia.
Danny Tenaglia.
Tenaglia, how you've been listening to him since you were 17, and then you've done a record together, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I engineered for him, actually.
Engineered for him, yes. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that is the thing. It's like the thing to like finding that place or that thing that you want to do that you were talking about. It's, you just need to stay open to whatever those signs are that are coming to you. And kind of, there's a really good book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And it kind of gets into how he like just started one day to decide to just surrender to whatever was coming to him and just try to do the best that he could at whatever that was. And he kind of like moved all around these different spaces, but like life just kept getting better and better the more he just kind of let it go with the flow. And I really do feel like that, because at first, I mean, and this has been like a journey for me to get to that point, like personally and spiritually. But I feel like earlier in my career, like I had this idea of like how I was going to make my career happen. And I was like, I just got to make music, and then this is going to happen, and then I'm going to tour, and that's it. And I could have kept those blinders on, but at some point I kind of switched, and I was like, oh, and certain opportunities would present themselves. And even if I didn't totally feel ready to like do it, I was like, well, it's here. And I was like, I could do it, or maybe I can. And I started leaping into things, and that's how stuff just continued to evolve. Like even the Danny thing, I put myself out there. Like I know his manager, and I just said to him, I was like, if you know anybody who like would want to learn Ableton or whatever, I'm starting to kind of coach and do this thing. And then that's how he kind of introed me to Danny, and then Danny and I started working together. But I think it's just staying open to that, to these opportunities that present themselves. And then even with the academy, I always thought that I needed to be this like at a Jamie Jones level. And then you're like, oh yeah, and then I'll start this thing, and then people want to do it. And somebody came to me and was like, yo, would you want to like start your own like coaching program or academy? And I was like, and he explained it to me in a way of, there's people out there that have a problem and you have the solution. And then it's just making them kind of see that thing. And I was like, all right, yeah. I was like, I always knew I wanted to do it, so why not? And then it works out. Like sometimes you just gotta take a leap and just trust, and that's it.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And there's so much wisdom about actually how we always think we have to be at a certain level and ready for X, Y, and Z, whatever we want to do. But what you're saying, and what I'm hearing, not just in this example, but also in previous ones, is there was always or often an element of perhaps not feeling ready, but still going for it. And it being the perfect thing, that being like the next level that you were supposed to do. So our head always creating these limitations of, how it should be or how it should look like.
Yeah. And a lot of that is fear. Like you're just afraid that like it won't work out. But for me at this point, I'm just like, well, what's the worst that could happen? What if I did try to like engineer for Danny and it just failed? Well, okay, fine. It just didn't work out. That's fine. It's not the end of the world. Or what if I did try to like coach people and I knew I would be a great coach, but what if it didn't sell? Or what if and it's just like, those are all the things that are up here and like like you were saying, our limiting beliefs. And it just kind of comes down to figuring that out. And that's not something that happens overnight. Like it takes a lot of work for sure.
Yeah. And from that moment that you described, being at that party and being really moved by the music to then being signed by Toolroom Records and Baikonur Records. I can never, sorry for the
Baikonur,
Resonance Records. That's amazing. I mean, Toolroom, I used to absolutely be in love with Toolrooms from a young age. So that's amazing. So
Thank you.
I know you've talking about the goals and the visions and almost, having the faith and doing the sacrifice, but how did that actually look like for you for listeners now being like, okay, how did you get there?
Yeah, it takes a lot of work and a lot of determination. And there's a couple of moments that I can think of that really changed everything. And one of them being, so that party in Detroit was 2013, that May. So 2015, I was going to ADE and I was like, all right, I'm making the best music that I can make. I'm like, here it is. I'm going to hand out this music. It's going to get signed. I'm going to break through. Game over. Let's go. So I go to ADE and I had dinner with Ralph Lawson, who owns 2020 Visions. And I was like, all right, cool. Gave Ralph a stick. I'm like, I'm going to get signed 2020 Visions. Career, takeoff. 2 weeks later, Ralph comes back to me and he's, like the music is good. But I feel like the production needs to come on a bit more. And I was just so gutted. I was like, I don't know what's missing. This is the best I got. I was like, if this ain't it, then maybe I'm just not meant to do this. So after a couple of days of feeling sorry for myself, I was like, all right. I was like, I'm gonna just kind of brush the dirt off. And I started to objectively listen to like my music and the music that was out there, the artists that I liked, the labels that I liked. And I started to find where those holes were. And so I started taking courses in everything from music theory, jazz theory, sound design, mixing and mastering. If it was about music, like I was in it. Like that was it. Like I'm a lifelong learner. Come from like a family of teachers that like they're just, I mean, my grandmother got her doctorate at 63 or like some crazy age like that. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I'm just built that way. Like even now, like I'm about to start the new Elevated Academy podcast. I'm like, oh, I could just read this book on interviewing. I don't know. I love learning, which I think is why the music thing and just always having something to learn is like my thing. But yeah, like I just took courses everywhere, this program and that program. And it took me years, but then I started releasing on labels, Resonance at the time. And then I had Beatport top 10 at that point. And it was funny because I always said to myself, I was like, I don't care what happens. I was like, but if I don't land on one of Ralph's labels, I was like, I haven't made it yet. So like Ralph took like one of my tracks. I was like, all right, cool. Like now we're there. I know I'm good. And then, I started touring, playing parties like Elro and getting signed to Toolroom and like doing all of those things. But it took a lot of work. A lot of people don't realize like how much it really takes to get into those things. And we just finished up like a 5-week Ibiza residency over the summer. But like it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm sure you've started at the beginning to do all of this on the side of your day job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So doing those extra hours to really push for it, I assume.
Yeah. And so you really got to want it if you're going to do it. But yeah, I always say, my mom always says, you could be whatever you want in life, just don't be outworked. And so like, I know that if I didn't get to where I wanted to get to, it wasn't going to be because I didn't give it everything that I had. And so that's the thing. Like in the music industry, it takes a little bit of luck. You make your own luck, but you got to meet the right people, or like people have to make the decisions, or maybe you're making really great music, but it doesn't fit or whatever. And there's other factors outside of it's not as direct as, oh, put in the work and then you're going to make it. But so I knew that at the end of the day, if I didn't get to where I wanted to get to, it wasn't going to be because I didn't do everything that I could have done.
Yeah. No, I agree with you in that, as you can just put your everything into it, and then if it works out, fantastic, and if it hasn't, you know that you've given it all. So yeah, it's a very different feeling than looking back later on and being like, well, I could have done more. I think that's always one of those thoughts which I find I always remind myself of, like in the future, if I looked back, would I regret not putting effort in there? Or how would I feel then? And yeah, it's a very useful way of thinking. And so tell me a little bit more about your academy, because you're helping lots of people on their music journey. So how does it look like, and what do you do with them?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. It's honestly one of my favorite things and the most rewarding parts of like my music journey. Like seeing people hit their goals that they've set out. One of our students hit Beatport #1 on his first ever release. We got students hitting target labels on the regular, Beatport top 10s. Everyone's doing great. But then you get students too that their goals are just, I just want to finish a track. And so I love working with them to hit whatever people's goals are. Like I love to work with them to achieve that and help them in any way that I can. I joke with my students and I'm like, yo, like once you're in, like you're stuck with me. Like the guy who was like my first student, like him and I are super tight. And I just want to see him do well and grow and everything. And that's how I feel about all my students. Once you're in the academy, it's not like you finish class and then I just like, all right, see ya. It's just, I don't know, not built that way. But yeah, basic, the academy came from that whole ADE scenario with Ralph, where I had to take these courses in all these different places. And I basically knew that I always wanted to share that knowledge, but I wanted to create the program that I wish existed in one place when I was at that point in 2015. And I think I've done that. And I feel like there's a lot of value that goes with it because now you can't just make great music. Like it goes beyond that. So we do things where I have people come in and talk about social media growth and streaming numbers and music business and branding and mindset stuff. Like myself and a couple other people do monthly mindset calls. And yeah, it's just like a full 360 program that, I mean, I hope gets people to go from being just a producer to being an artist, because that's the difference now. It's big labels, talent buyers. Like they don't want someone that just makes great music. Like you kind of have to be that full package, unfortunately. Yeah. Like it's just the nature of the industry right now. So I try to give people all the tools that they can have to do that. Like we just finished the Crusher 2025 Goals workshop over the weekend, where I walk them through the process that I personally take to look back on the previous year, look back on the year ahead, setting goals, different habits, like tracker things and stuff that I've done that really has made my career leap forward. And I'm like, oh, I'm giving you the keys to the kingdom. If you want to do it and you want to go here, this is it. Do it.
Amazing. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. So I no doubt people are wanting to stay with you if you're putting this much love and effort, and I can feel it from how you speak about it. Your face lights up and everything when you do speak about it. You're putting everything into it, and it sounds wonderful, like a whole round thing for everything that one needs right now, not just one aspect of it. And with your mindset and everything that we've talked about, I'm sure, you are giving them that key to kingdom. Yeah. And actually, so now with all those elements that you do, and obviously as a music producer, well, as an artist and touring and all of these elements that come to it, and then the academy and so on, and your family, and how do you keep the balance, or how do you keep yourself nurtured and taken care of too, to not fall in perhaps into a overwork or burnout or whatever it could happen?
Yeah. Oh, it definitely can happen. Mm-hmm. And for one, I have to say that my wife keeps me very well balanced. She's the yin to my yang type scenario, where she'll go like, you need to chill a little bit. Cause I used to be like, very like, all right, I'm just going to work. Like, that's it. But I mean, I have a lot of self-care practices that I do. Like I meditate every morning. I journal every morning. I do breath work every morning. I plan out my week on Sunday. Like Sunday is my favorite day of the week. Mm-hmm. Like I kind of do this like journaling practice where, well, first I'll do a visualization, and then I do this journaling practice where I basically look back on the previous week. I write down every win that I have for the whole week. So like big, small, doesn't matter until I can't write anymore. And I kind of like celebrate those, because I feel like the more you celebrate that, the more you're bringing that energy towards you, law of attraction kind of thing. And also it just feels good to just celebrate. And then I look back on what didn't work for the week, and then how can I improve that for the week ahead? And then I write down what are like the 5 big things I need to get done for the week, which I call like the rocks. And so if you think about like your schedule for the week in terms of like rocks, pebbles, and sand, your rocks are the big goals. Your pebbles are like the stuff that you kind of really need to like get done. That's like important. And then the sand is like all that extra stuff. So if you think about like a container, if you were to put the sand in first, right, it's going to fill most of the container. And then you put the pebbles. And then if you put the rocks, like the rocks aren't going to fit. Mm-hmm. But if you schedule in the rocks first, and the rocks are basically the stuff that I need to get done that I know, if these are the only 5 things I get done for the week, I'll be like, okay, yeah, like I moved the needle forward in terms of whatever it is that I was trying to do.
Yeah.
So basically when you schedule the rocks in first, and then you put the pebbles, those pebbles will trickle into the empty spaces. And then you put the sand, and that sand is going to fill in the rest of those empty spots. But the rocks are in there. So yeah, maybe you don't answer those 20 emails you need to get to for the day. But if the studio was the important thing you were supposed to do, and that's what you got done, then that's fine and that's okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like practices like that really do help, because I'm like, okay, here's my schedule. This is what I need to get done. And it lets me let go of, instead of being like, oh, but I didn't answer all these. Okay, yeah, like maybe I didn't do this, but it's all right because I did these other things, and that's the stuff that really matters. So yeah. I think it's a combination of the planning mixed with just the daily practices of staying grounded. And I always give myself one day off for the week and just hang out with the wife and the dog and do the things and stuff. And so it's good.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like you've got that figured out for sure.
Yeah,
and I know that feeling that you're describing, actually, when you do have sort of an awareness of, and you've talked or thought everything through, and then you know, okay, you're not going to beat yourself up, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, I know for myself, what you've just described, I resonated with in moments where I don't do that. I'm like, oh, I didn't do this. And you're just putting yourself down for what you haven't done. And it also gives a little bit more of a stress feeling, doesn't it? It's cortisol and you can really notice it. But if you have done that, then you're kind of like, no, it's all under control. You've thought about the whole week and that it's okay and you can be more relaxed. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And because too, it's, stuff gets crazy during the week. So if I'm just winging it, and there'll be weeks for whatever reason, I don't do that on a Sunday. And I just feel so all over the place. You get caught up in this like whirlwind of like stuff because it's, oh, this is going on and that's going on. And I'm like, well, what do I do? And then I'm doing all this stuff, but I don't know if I'm really doing what I should. Am I being productive or am I just busy?
Right.
And so it's kind of like when I plan this out on Sunday, like when stuff starts getting crazy and my head, even if my head does get a little all over the place, I'm like, well, you know what? When I was clear-headed on a Sunday morning, I decided that this was the best thing that I needed to do.
Yeah.
And then again, I just trust and have faith that that was the right thing that I had to do. And I just do it. And that's it. It doesn't matter what I'm feeling in that moment.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So yeah, that's definitely something that I would recommend if anybody listening right now is not doing it. Try it. It's definitely worth it. So I'm so curious about binaural beats you talked about. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm big into the spirituality side of things and law of attraction and energy and healings. Like I do get Reiki regularly and have like my spiritual teachers and stuff. And yeah, one day, like my spiritual teacher and I were just talking. She was like, oh, it'd be really cool if you made some like music for meditations and stuff. And so I, again, found some course and just learned how to kind of like make these binaural beats and what binaurals like actually are. And so basically what a binaural is, so you have different frequencies on the left side and the right side of, which is why you always have to listen to binaurals in headphones because it doesn't really work if you don't. And what happens is if you say you have 4 hertz on the left side and 7 hertz on the right side, your brain perceives the difference. So it winds up being 3 hertz. And so that is in relation to like your alpha state and your theta state and like all of that. And so you can play with bringing people's attention down, or maybe you are trying to get them to relax more in a meditation. And so you can gradually do that. And it's a really fun thing. Like I kind of think about it Like when I was coming up in like the music scene, like everybody was playing all night long or 12-hour sets and things like that. And it was all about the journey. And I just feel like when I make those meditations, like it is kind of like that, because you could do things where you kind of like spike the binaural and it like kind of wakes people up a little bit, but then you bring it back down. So they kind of like fall back into this meditative state. But that little kind of spike can give them like this kind of aha moment a little bit. But then I started putting like healing frequencies in it. So I did one with my teacher where I did one for every chakra. And then she did like a meditation over it, which was it's really cool. But even just the binaurals alone are really cool without the meditation over the top.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's a good side project for me. It's just another part of the Elevated brand. And hopefully if anybody's into that, I can get them to like bring that up a notch, or if people aren't into it and I can get it to them and then maybe, oh, let me try this out. And they're like, oh, this actually is really cool. Like I'm all for it. I have tried to figure out a way to put like healing frequencies in like regular music. Makes it a little bit harder for sure. So I haven't gotten to that, but there is an artist that does things like that. She's actually based in New York, Desna. She's like a techno artist and I forget what she calls it, because she calls like a specific type of techno, but like she'll name her tracks like after the hertz that like she used in this thing.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, it really is interesting. And I know you're doing it yourself. Are you doing this part of your meditation on a daily basis, the binaural beats as well? Or is this?
No, I use just the regular. I like to meditate in silence. I've kind of gotten to that point. I used to use like guided meditations, but I kind of like the quiet. And especially like in the morning, I feel like I hear things a lot more like in my own head and in my own intuition. Whereas like when I was using like a guided or like even the binaural, it just winds up not being the same. But like I've definitely done it. Like I always do any binaural that I make, I always do it myself as soon as like I'm done.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I make my wife do it too. And she'll be like, yo, that was like so sick. She's like, did you feel that? I was like, yeah, I did. I was like, I know what I was doing.
Wonderful. And so people can find it on your brand, Elevated. Like how could they access it, those binaural beats? Or
I was doing a weekly newsletter, and like for the month, I would send out a different one for the whole month. I haven't been doing that. So if they do want it, they could just send me a DM on Instagram and I will gladly share whatever they want. It's totally fine.
All right. Amazing. That's wonderful. By the way, I'd be curious to listen to them as well.
I'll send it over when we're done.
Amazing. So from all this wisdom that I've heard from you say, I'm curious as well, like your perspective on, if at all you could think of those aspects of in terms of like mistakes on the way that perhaps, well, when we know that mistakes aren't mistakes, they're all part of the learning process. But if you're helping your students, for example, what might be some of those things that you might want to help them to not go through that because you've learned it and are helping them to perhaps jump through them or over them? Or
I think one of them definitely is like early in my career, I was kind of like following trends a bit. Like I was like, oh, this is cool. And at the time, like I played a lot of different styles of music and I enjoy a lot of different styles of music. So I always used to pride myself in my versatility. But in terms of an artist and breaking through, that's not really the best way to do it. But it was more of I was just chasing what I thought I should be making versus making what I wanted to make. Well, I mean, I wanted to make it, but making stuff that I felt like I needed to make. And I think that that's like one of the big things that I learned. I used to hear DJs, and you could apply it to production too, but like DJs be like, oh, well, like I play for myself. And I was like, well, that's selfish. Like you should play for the crowd. What are you talking about? And then as I like matured, like I realized, no, that is the right thing, because you can't play for the crowd because you're not going to be able to please everybody. It's just not possible. But if you play or make the music that you feel needs to be out in the world, there's going to be people that vibe with that. Like you're going to put out this certain thing and there's people that are going to be attracted to it. And those are the people that you want to attract anyway. And so it's just creating what you feel like needs to be there. And that's the best thing that you can do. So that would definitely be one thing. And it kind of goes along with breaking through as an artist. A good analogy is if you had a wall in front of you and I told you to punch through the wall, like you wouldn't punch holes all over the wall and then try to get through. You're going to punch in one place till that hole gets bigger. And then you kind of step through the wall and then you can do whatever you want. And so it's a similar thing. I call it sonic branding. And you want people to see your name and know what they're going to get. Because if you send me a track and I'm like, oh, this is sick, I love this. And then you send me like a second thing and maybe it's not, maybe I'm like, oh, this first one's tech house. Like I really love this thing. It fits my style. And then the second one is like this like melodic techno track. And although I do love melodic techno, but maybe I'm like, oh, well, that's not for me. Well, now I'm probably less likely to listen to the third thing because I don't know what to expect. Is it worth my time? So it's like a brand, right? If you go to Nike to get sneakers all the time, and then one day Nike's, yo, we don't make sneakers. Like we make cars. And you're gonna be like, well, I don't go to Nike for cars. I go to, I don't know, Honda for cars. So, and it just throws that branding off. So you want people to see your name and know what to expect, which is why people have aliases, right? I mean, all these older DJs, like you see some of the things like, oh yeah, and they're this guy and they're that guy and they're this guy too. And then because it's just, oh, this is what they do when they make house music. And this is the other thing because it fits, right? Like you can't like just be throwing everything out there, I feel like is also another thing.
Right. Yeah. Great advice. Thank you. I think I can really see what you're saying there, and it makes complete sense. So that's really valuable as well. So as a spiritual person yourself, with what you're doing with your heart and feels creatively like very activated as well, I'm curious, how would you describe what creativity is for you?
It's a good question. I feel like creativity for me and for anyone else is just self-expression, right? Like I have an artist friend of mine, Chris Malfi, who does like amazing work on like glass and graffiti. And he had this movement that he was doing with a group of people called Art Off Paper. And he explains it as everyone has their own art off paper. So whether it's my music or your music or someone's art or how someone dresses or how someone does their makeup or like the way a player does a certain move or something, like that's their art and everybody has that. And so we're all creative beings. I think for me, it just comes from kind of that place of I feel like this needs to exist, where I'm like, I'll hear some sample or hear some song and be like, oh, this would be really cool if I heard it like on the dance floor. Like this would be really cool if I heard it here. I'm always pulling inspiration from different things. Like I could be watching a movie and be like, oh, wow, that was like a cool, like 3 words. That would make a really cool song or something like that. I think that is a lot of it. And I don't know, I just feel this, it's like a call almost. Like I know that I'm just like a vessel for some like higher thing that's, oh, this needs to come through you to come out. And whether it's music, like I've done, like when music started to be a lot less of a hobby, like I got into photography. And I like doing that too. I just like the creativity of all these different things. But yeah, I think that's really where it kind of comes from. It's just self-expression.
Yeah, it's beautiful. For somebody that thinks, oh, I'm not creative, I'm one of the exceptions, which both of you agree on that everyone's creative. What do you feel might be some important ingredient perhaps for that can help creativity to flow or help that person to acknowledge or see or utilize that creativity? I mean, as it's already there just by not doing anything, but what would be your
I think exploration, right? Because we don't really know what that is sometimes. Like I happen to fall into the music thing, but maybe you're like, oh, well, art is like drawing and I can't draw. Like I can't draw, by the way. That's not my thing. Can't do it. I leave that up to my wife because she's like amazing at that stuff. Like I don't have, I mean, I could if I wanted to, like I'd practice it, but just not my natural thing by any means. But everybody has their different stuff. So if you think you're not creative, like just keep experimenting with different things. Maybe it's dance, right? Like maybe that winds up being your thing, or maybe it is like graphic design or photography or something that's completely unrelated. Like maybe it's makeup art. Like maybe you're a makeup artist. Like maybe just keep exploring and staying open to things and just follow your heart would be my answer. Like you can, if you quiet down and listen enough, you can hear or see where you're supposed to go. Like people have this like natural pull to these things. And you always hear people like later in life, they'll be like, oh, like I always wanted to do this thing, but I never really had the courage to do this, or, oh, but I had to do this other thing. So we know what it is that we like want to do. It's just a matter of taking the time to kind of quiet down and pausing and listening to that.
Yeah. Yeah, those thoughts that come to mind of common things people say, I don't have the time, like you just mentioned, or I didn't have the money, or so on. So, which of course can contribute to that. But what would you perhaps say in a circumstance, not feeling like they have the funds or the time? Like, what would be some ways you, Salvione, would handle that? Be curious.
I mean, we all have the same amount of hours in the day, right? Mm-hmm. And yes, some are more busy than others. But if you really want to do something, I feel like basically that if you're saying, this is what you have to think about. If you really want to do something and you're like, I don't have the time, you have to think about the fact that everything else that's not that thing that you want to do, that you say yes to, means you're saying no to the thing that you want to do. And so you need to like think, and when you think about it like that, it's, oh, wow, yeah, that's right. Like when I sit down and watch like Netflix, like that means I'm saying no to the time to do this other thing that I want to do. And I mean, I'm not comparing me to other people because I'm just a little nuts with certain things, but like I run the academy, I tour, I make music, I engineer for other people. Like I'm not like starting the Elevate Academy podcast. I'm about to start writing for Data Transmission, doing some things. Like I have a lot of shit that I do. And if I have time to fit it in, there's definitely time in people's schedules. And even if it's just a small amount, like I tell my students all the time, like people think in like production or whatever, oh, well, I gotta be able to sit for 2 hours or 3 hours. You don't. Small steps add up. Maybe you only have 20 minutes, right? But if you get in on Monday and you take 20 minutes, you're like, all right, I'm gonna write drums. And you write some drums in 20 minutes. And then you got 20 minutes on Tuesday and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna write a bass line. Okay, you write a bass line on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, oh, I got 15 minutes. Let me find a vocal hook. And then Thursday, you're like, oh, yeah, I need a synth. Like I got like 25 minutes. Let me like do a synth. Well, now you have a solid loop. And then on Friday, you could be like, all right, well, now I got an hour. Let me like arrange it. And now I got 30 minutes. So yeah, did you sit for 4 hours in one day? No. But those 20 minutes over time add up. And so it's just people like you think you need like all this time and like you don't. And a lot of times if you're like, oh, I have 20 minutes and you start, it winds up being like an hour anyway. Cause you're like, oh yeah, like I'll just keep going or whatever. So I think that fear of starting is always a big thing as well.
Yeah, yeah. And as you've just described it, it felt so much lighter than when you think, oh, I only have 20 minutes and I'm thinking of doing a track and how to put that in 20 minutes. But when you think about it, like, actually, now let's just think of the kick. And now let's just think of that's such a nice way. That feels already much lighter. And then 20 minutes already they feel like, okay, I can do it. Whereas otherwise, when you don't have those thoughts, I guess maybe clearer, organized, or perhaps, organized.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. It becomes overwhelming. And there's a story I heard recently so I think it was Sir David Brailsford, and he basically took over the British cycling team for like, in terms of like training and stuff. And like at that point, like they hadn't won a medal in 100 years or something along those lines. And what he found was like the team was like basically what he said was like focusing on like the podium. They were chasing like the medals. They were chasing all this stuff. And he kind of made them have this mindset shift where he was like, yo, don't focus on the podium, focus on the pedals, like focus on every pedal stroke, focus on like the muscles, like the whole like bit of it. And like in focusing on the pedals, like the podiums come, right? So when you can break stuff down and focus on the smaller things, and this is something that I teach the students too, where if you think about your goals in a pyramid, right? And at the top of the pyramid is your vision. And that's the thing. At the top of the pyramid, you have the least amount of control. As you move down to the bottom, you have the most amount of control. So you got your vision. That's your like, I want to be a touring DJ, releasing on these labels or whatever it is. There's a lot of things that have to happen before that can happen. It's not like an immediate thing that's in your control to do. then you can kind of step down. You got like your goals or like your, let's say, quarterly goals. And so like those goals, if you hit them, they'll feed into that vision, right? And then those quarterly goals, maybe you got like your weekly, like your monthly tasks or monthly like projects, right? And it's okay, well, in order for me to hit this goal, if I'm like, oh, I want to release, let's say like I want to release like a track, right? Okay, well then to hit that, well then I need to finish 3 tracks. I need to reach out to labels. I need to do all this stuff. And then, okay, well, if I need to finish 3 tracks, well, that means I need to write 10 drum grooves. I need to write this many bass lines and I need to do whatever. So now we're at like, say like a weekly or like a lower level. And you get to those tasks, like those daily tasks. And so it kind of goes back to that faith thing and like the planning situation where you're like, all right, these are the things I need to do. But if you hit the day, right? And I call it winning the day. Mm-hmm. So if you win the day, and let's be serious, like you're not going to win every day, but it's about progress and not perfection. Yeah. But if you win more days in a week than you lose, then you start winning weeks. If you start winning weeks, you start winning months. You start winning months, you start winning years. And that's what really pushes you forward. But if you're just focused on this end goal, it is overwhelming because you're like, oh my God, like I have to get signed to Hot Creations and I need to do this and I need to tour and I need to do everything. Whereas if you focus on the thing that you can control, which is that thing every day. So if you're like, oh, I need to make a track and you're focused on just making that track, then yeah, to think, oh, 20 minutes, that's all I have. I can't make a track in 20 minutes. Like you're focusing on that end thing. There's 20 different things that have to happen before you've made a track. So if you focus on those things, those will add up and you'll hit that end thing. Just win the day.
I love it. You're putting things in such a really nicely digestible way, and it's got a very elevated mindset.
Thank you.
which makes me want to listen back to this recording or to this podcast episode at least a couple of times just to hear it again, because it's really, really useful. So thank you so much for sharing that and for having the academy, for teaching it to your students and bringing it out into the world. I think it's a really beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in that case, I would love to, thank you for coming today on this podcast. And I would love to ask for any particular announcements that we'd like to give to anybody. If there is anything that you want to share, also how people can perhaps join your academy, like anything that you feel would be important to mention.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I had a great time chatting and I've gotten a lot out of this. So I appreciate you having me on for sure.
Pleasure.
And in terms of announcements, let's see, if you want to get in touch with me or anything about the academy, we have @Elevated Academy on Instagram, but you can also just reach out to me either on Instagram either at the academy or at Salvione Music, or shoot me an email at mike@westayelevated.com. We have a new cohort for the advanced production program kicking off in the end of January. And we also have, as part of that, we are doing a Finish Music Faster workshop to start the year. So it's a 3-week thing where I'm just kind of showing the processes and techniques that I use to, finish quality tracks in an hour. And I'm giving out some of my Ableton racks and things like that. I'm also throwing in a Art of the Remix masterclass where I'm teaching kind of like the proper, like what is a remix, the proper techniques to do a remix and to kind of put your own original kind of sound into it. And I am giving my stems from my upcoming Purple Tea Records release for students to practice with. And the student with the best remix is also going to get an official release on the EP. Yeah. So that's all coming up. So that's January. So yeah, that's the big thing at the moment.
Amazing. And just to know about the date exactly, January, like what, middle?
The last week of January, the program will start. But the second week of January, we're starting the masterclass for the Finish Music Faster.
All righty. Okay, cool. Well, everybody get excited because this sounds really, really cool. Like amazing things you've got going. So many opportunities for people to get engaged and learn from you, and also, get signed. That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm like I said, I'm always trying to just help people any way that I can. And so I got the label agreed. I was like, "Yo, would you be open to this?" And they were like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so we're doing it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we got tons of content I'm putting out on the Elevated Academy Instagram. We got Mindset Mondays, tutorials, a bunch of different stuff. So check that out. What else? Be on the lookout for the Elevated Academy podcast coming soon.
Oh, yeah. Amazing. Well, lots to come. That's so cool. Yeah. And also, don't forget, if you do want the binaural beats,
yes,
the things from you, reach out to you.
Give you the whole folder.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Salvione. It's been a real pleasure, as I mentioned already. And maybe because there's always so many elements and more questions that I would definitely want to explore, but perhaps we can do another one in the future.
I would love to. Anytime you want me on, I'm there. You let me know.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Born to Create. I hope you found today's conversation as inspiring and enlightening as I did. Remember, creativity is not just about making art. It's about embracing transformation, nurturing our mental and emotional health, and connecting with our deeper selves. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you these powerful stories. Until next time, stay inspired, keep creating, and remember that you were born to create.